everyone, and welcome to this live reaction stream on another big day of news in Formula One. I'm Alex Shakes. I'm delighted to be joined by the senior man at F1.com and F1 TV presenter Lawrence Barretto. Lawrence, the big news this morning: Franco Colapinto is replacing Jack Doohan at Alpine. It's more big news from Alpine in the last 24 hours. What's your reaction to what we've learned this morning?
Well, yeah, it's been dramatic, Alex. I know over the last couple of days there's been some increase in speculation that Franco was going to get in the car and replace Jack. It was just uncertain at which point and when the team would announce it. Ever since Jack's really been announced as an Alpine race driver, he got his debut this year. Unfortunately for him, he's had Franco essentially stood behind him, watching his every move and put the pressure on him. And Alpine have just decided, after 6 races in the car and what they've seen from Jack, and he has yet to score points, he's had a couple of big crashes, they've decided to switch it up and to, what they say, evaluate their driver lineup and their driver pool. And they want to put Franco in and give him a run of 5 races, starting at Imola next weekend, and giving him a chance to race on 3 tracks in that triple header that he has experience of.
Has experience there from F2, and also has been testing an old Alpine around the Imola circuit earlier this year. I think the news was expected after the Sunday at the Miami Grand Prix, but it's that driver evaluation part of the press release that catches the eye. 5 races to stake your claim after the last guy got 6.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm not sure why he hasn't got 6 too, but I guess the British Grand Prix is a home race of sorts, and it might feel like that was a natural point for them within the season to make that decision going forward. Look, Alpine have got this driver pool. They've got Franco Colapinto, they've got Jack Doohan, they've got Paul Aaron, and they have got the opportunity in this somewhat transitional year while they're trying to build the team back up ahead of the regulation change in 2026. So they've got the opportunity to do it. And I guess they can do a back-to-back test of sorts where they put Frank under better pressure. Say you've got 5 races, so you're not indefinitely in the car. And then they can really kind of pressure test him to see whether or not he's got what it takes, or what they believe he's got enough to keep that seat, not maybe just till the end of the year, but into 2026 and beyond. And they will probably feel like they've given Jack a good stab at it. He obviously had his home race in Australia. He's had 6 races to try and get some momentum to build a rhythm. And there have been some high points. You know, even last time out in Miami, he out-qualified Pierre Gasly, his teammate, for the first time. He came close to scoring points in Bahrain. So I think he's shown the kind of flashes of speed that Alpine believed he had. It's just been the inconsistency. You know, it's that crash in Australia, it was the crash in Japan, and it was just generally being a little bit too far off Pierre in both qualifying and the race. So for Alpine, I guess, to put Franco in the car, he joined the team because they believed that he had the capability to be a race driver. When he left, when Williams allowed him or came to an agreement or loaned him, whatever terminology you want to use, to Alpine, they said it was to allow him to get a race seat. So I think there was always this narrative that in joining Alpine, even on the bench, he would have the opportunity at some point to get a race seat. I'm not sure he thought and Jack thought it was going to come this soon, but I think the possibility was always there. So I think Alpine, from the press release and the wording within there, are trying to be pragmatic, and they want to put Franco in the car and see what he's got. And I guess the reality is they've got this pool and they can do what they want with their drivers.
It's absolutely the case. It's reminiscent of what we've seen Red Bull do with their junior programs in the past. I want to take this subject by subject then, because I think the first headline, Lawrence, is going to be that a ton of people this morning will be thinking, how on earth is this enough time to stake your claim in Formula One as a rookie? There's a lot of people who are going to be thinking, how on earth can you perform given the circumstances that you just described? And Jack began his Formula One career with this looming over him. How do you assess his performance given the spectre of how he got his chance in Formula One?
I think he's had a really tough time of it. I think they put him in the car for the final race of the season in Abu Dhabi, replacing Esteban Ocon, because they knew he was obviously moving on to Haas. And that's really hard to just jump into a car in the final race of the season. And I actually thought he did a decent job. Didn't score, but did a decent job around Abu Dhabi. He then had a natural pre-season. But as we know, Alex, you don't get a proper amount of time in the car in testing anymore. He got, 1.5 days. And that's not really enough to kind of get up to speed within your own environment. And I think when you're going into a team like Alpine, when you've got Pierre, who is clearly the future, they extended his contract, he is the lead driver, and then you're in the other seat and you've got to perform quickly and immediately because you've got Franco Colapinto, who did such a great job when he was super subbed in for Logan Sargent for the final 9 races last year. When you've got Franco around, that he clearly gets on well with Flavio Briatore, that he's brought a load of sponsors to the team, and he's brought that financial backing. That's kind of like you kind of hinted at, like that spectre in the room. It must be an immense amount of pressure. And I think for Jack, he has actually done a pretty good job of trying to do his best within that very difficult environment. There's been so much noise. I don't think a weekend has passed this year where we haven't talked about the prospect of Jack being replaced. And for a young driver, that must be really tough. And then we saw, like you hinted at, Liam Lawson losing his drive at Red Bull after just 2 races after Australia and China. That must have stressed Jack out a lot more because he can see how quickly things have changed in the reality when he's on the grid. And I think that as much as Alpine were backing him and they gave him their support, they never came out and said, Jack, you're definitely getting the seat for the full year. They never came out and kind of did that. But then equally, they didn't say, Jack, you're under pressure, you've got to deliver. It was coming kind of somewhere in the middle. And I know from talking to people at Alpine, there's a lot of people in that team who have a lot of time for Jack, and they were impressed with the job that he's done. They are particularly under pressure. And I think this will be a repeated topic that we'll talk about throughout this stream, that everything he had to do was under this constant pressure. And we've seen, like Yuki Tsunoda even going into Red Bull, it's really hard to build momentum and find and adjust to a team. Lewis is struggling at Ferrari. Carlos has taken some time at Williams. And Jack's doing this with no experience, or having to do that with no experience. So to your point, it's tough. Of course it is. 6 races is not a lot of time to prove that you've got what it takes. But it's so tough in Formula One these days when you've got so many drivers who are capable of being on the grid. And I think for Alpine and for Jack, this is just the scenario that they find themselves in. Alpine are 9th in the Constructors' Championship at the minute. They're not really fighting for anything beyond top of the midfield. It's not like a driver change like this is going to destabilise the team too dramatically. So it kind of makes sense to do it early on. And if they are just giving Franco 5 races, that should suggest that Jack, in theory, has the opportunity to come back. So he's back in the reserve role, and that's going to be tough to take. But it's not all over yet. They could have said, no, Franco, you in indefinitely, and they haven't said that yet. Whether or not, I don't know, behind the scenes, decisions have been made. The reality is, on paper, he has got a chance to come back.